Marcus Chen woke up at 5 in the morning like he did every day. His small apartment was quiet and cold. He lived alone in a tiny place with one bedroom, one bathroom, and a kitchen that was barely big enough for one person. The walls were thin and he could hear his neighbors moving around upstairs. He got out of bed slowly. His back always hurt in the mornings. 3 years ago, Marcus had worked in construction. He built houses and office buildings. He was good at his job and made decent money. But one day, a heavy piece of metal fell on his back at a construction site. The doctor said he was lucky to walk again, but his back would never be the same. He could not lift heavy things anymore. He could not climb ladders or work long hours standing up. The construction company gave him some money for his injury, but it was not enough to live on for very long. Marcus tried to find other jobs, but most employers wanted someone younger and stronger. At 34 years old, Marcus felt like his life had already ended before it really began. Marcus made a cup of instant coffee and ate a piece of toast for breakfast. He looked out his window at the gray London sky. It was going to be another long day. He put on his work clothes, old jeans, a worn-out jacket, and boots that had holes in them. Then he walked to the small closet where he kept his work supplies. His job now was cleaning the streets around Buckingham Palace. It was not the kind of work he had dreamed about when he was young, but it was honest work, and it paid enough to keep a roof over his head and food on his table. Marcus had learned not to complain about things he could not change. At 6 in the morning, Marcus walked to his work area. The streets around the palace were always busy, even early in the morning. Tourists came from all over the world to see where the royal family lived. They took pictures, dropped trash, and left behind all kinds of mess for Marcus to clean up. Marcus had his own small cart with wheels. In it he kept his broom, dustpan, trash bags, and a few other cleaning tools. The cart was old, and one of the wheels squeaked loudly as he pushed it down the street. He had asked his boss for a new cart many times, but the answer was always the same. There was no money in the budget for new equipment. The area around Buckingham Palace was huge. Marcus was responsible for cleaning about 6 blocks around the palace gates. This included the sidewalks, the street corners, and the small park areas where people sat to rest. Every day he found the same kinds of trash: food wrappers, empty bottles, cigarette butts, and sometimes things that tourists dropped by accident. As Marcus began his work that Tuesday morning, he watched the world wake up around him. Coffee shops opened their doors. Bus drivers started their routes. Police officers walked their beats. And of course the royal guards took their positions at the palace gates. The royal guards fascinated Marcus, even though he had seen them every day for 3 years. They stood perfectly still in their bright red uniforms and tall black hats. Their faces showed no emotion. They did not talk to anyone. They did not move unless they were changing shifts. Marcus had often wondered what it would be like to have a job where you had to stand still all day and never show any feelings. Marcus knew that being a royal guard was considered a great honor. These men were soldiers who had trained hard to earn their positions. They protected the royal family and represented the best of the British military. But Marcus also knew that their job was not easy. They had to stand in the same spot for hours in all kinds of weather: rain, snow, hot sun. Nothing was allowed to make them move or show discomfort. Sometimes tourists tried to make the guards laugh or smile. They would tell jokes, make funny faces, or even touch the guards, but the guards never reacted. They stared straight ahead as if the tourists were not there at all. Marcus had seen this happen hundreds of times. Over the years, Marcus had developed a routine. He started at the far end of his area and worked his way toward the palace gates. He picked up trash, swept the sidewalks, and emptied the public trash bins. The work was simple but important. Without people like Marcus, the beautiful area around the palace would quickly become dirty and unpleasant. Marcus took pride in his work, even though many people did not notice what he did. He liked seeing the clean streets and sidewalks after he finished each day. He knew that his work helped make the area beautiful for the millions of tourists who came to visit. But Marcus also felt invisible most of the time. People walked past him as if he was not there. Tourists looked through him when they were taking pictures. Even other workers in the area rarely spoke to him. He was just the street cleaner, someone doing a job that needed to be done but was not important enough to notice. The royal guards never looked at Marcus either. In 3 years of working around them, Not one guard had ever made eye contact with him or acknowledged his presence in any way. Marcus understood this was part of their training, but sometimes it made him feel even more invisible than usual. As Marcus worked that morning, he thought about his life and how different it was from what he had planned. When he was young, he had dreams of getting married, having children, maybe owning his own construction business someday. But life had other plans for him. Now he was alone, doing work that most people would never want to do, living paycheck to paycheck. But Marcus tried to stay positive. He was grateful to have a job when so many people did not. He was grateful to be alive and healthy enough to work. And he was grateful to live in a city as beautiful as London, even if he could only afford to live in the cheapest part of it. The morning was getting busier now. More tourists were arriving, and Marcus could see school groups gathering near the palace gates. It was going to be a typical day. Lots of people, lots of trash, and lots of cleaning to do. Marcus picked up his broom and continued working, not knowing that this ordinary Tuesday would change his life forever. By 9 in the morning, the area around Buckingham Palace was full of people. Marcus had been working for 3 hours and had already filled 4 large trash bags. The tourists were coming in steady streams now. Families with children, elderly couples, and groups of teenagers. Marcus was used to the crowds, but today felt different. There was more energy in the air, more noise than usual. A large group of teenagers had gathered near the main gates. They were loud and seemed excited about something. Marcus could hear them laughing and shouting to each other. The teenagers looked like they were around 16 or 17 years old. There were about 8 of them, both boys and girls. They wore expensive clothes and carried the latest phones. Marcus could tell they were not from London by their accents. They sounded American, probably tourists whose parents had brought them to see the sights. Marcus continued his work, picking up empty water bottles and food wrappers that people had dropped. He tried not to pay too much attention to the loud group, but it was hard to ignore them. They were getting closer to where he was working, and their voices were getting louder. "I dare you to touch one of those guards," one of the boys said. He was tall with blonde hair and seemed to be the leader of the group. "No way," a girl replied. "My dad said they have real guns." "They do have guns," another boy said. "But they are not allowed to use them unless someone is really dangerous." "I heard they are not even allowed to move," the tall boy said. "No matter what you do to them, they have to just stand there and take it." Marcus felt uncomfortable listening to this conversation. He had seen tourists bother the guards before, but something about this group worried him. They seemed like they were planning to do something stupid. The royal guard closest to where Marcus was working stood perfectly still. His name was James Wellington, though Marcus did not know this. Wellington had been a royal guard for 5 years. He was 28 years old and took his job very seriously. Wellington could hear the teenagers talking, but he showed no sign that he was listening. His training had taught him to ignore distractions. He stared straight ahead, his rifle held at exactly the right angle, his face showing no emotion. But inside, Wellington was alert and ready to respond if the situation became dangerous. The teenagers moved closer to the guard. Marcus was now working only about 10 feet away from where they were standing. He bent down to pick up some trash near a bench, keeping one eye on the group of young people. "Watch this," the tall boy said to his friends. He walked up to Wellington and stood right in front of him. "Hello, Mr. Guard," he said in a loud voice. "Can you hear me?" Wellington did not respond. He continued to stare straight ahead as if the boy was not there. "I told you," the boy said to his friends. "They cannot do anything." "They are like robots." The other teenagers laughed and moved closer. A few of them took out their phones to record what was happening. Other tourists in the area started to notice and gathered around to watch. "Let me try something," a girl in the group said. She walked up to Wellington and waved her hand in front of his face. Still no response from the guard. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. He had seen this kind of thing before, and it usually did not end well. But he was just a street cleaner. It was not his place to tell tourists how to behave. He continued picking up trash, but he kept watching the situation. The tall boy was getting bolder now. He had the attention of his friends and the growing crowd of tourists. "I bet I can make him move," he said. "How?" one of his friends asked. "Just watch," the boy replied. Marcus saw the boy look around on the ground. He picked up what looked like a small stone from the pavement. Marcus realized what the boy was planning to do, and his heart started beating faster. "You should not do that," Marcus said quietly. But the boy did not hear him over the noise of the crowd. The boy stepped back from Wellington and held up the stone. "I am going to throw this at his feet," he announced to his friends. "Let us see if that makes him move." "Do not do that," a woman in the crowd said. That is not nice, but the boy ignored her. His friends were cheering him on, and he was enjoying being the center of attention. Marcus was still bent down, picking up trash near the bench. He was directly between the boy and the guard. The boy pulled his arm back, ready to throw the stone, but instead of throwing it, the boy decided to kick it instead. He thought this would be more impressive for his friends. He pulled his leg back and kicked as hard as he could. The problem was that Marcus chose that exact moment to stand up. The boy's foot, moving fast and hard, connected directly with Marcus's face just as he lifted his head. The impact was terrible. Marcus felt like he had been hit by a truck. Pain exploded through his nose and spread across his entire face. Marcus fell backward hard. His cleaning cart tipped over, spilling trash and tools across the pavement. Blood immediately started flowing from his nose and mouth. He hit the ground with a loud thud that made people in the crowd gasp. The boy who had kicked him stood frozen in shock. His friends stopped laughing immediately. The crowd of tourists began to murmur and point. Some people started taking pictures and videos with their phones. Marcus lay on the ground, stunned and bleeding. His nose was definitely broken. His vision was blurry and he could taste blood in his mouth. He tried to sit up but felt dizzy and sick. "Oh my God," the boy said. "I did not mean to hit him. I was trying to kick the stone." But his words sounded hollow. Everyone could see what had really happened. The boy had been showing off for his friends and had badly hurt an innocent man who was just trying to do his job. Marcus touched his face and felt warm blood covering his hand. The pain was getting worse, not better. He looked up and saw the faces of strangers staring down at him. Some looked concerned, others just curious. A few were still taking pictures. Wellington had seen everything. For 5 years, he had been trained to never break his position, never show emotion, never respond to anything happening around him. But as he watched Marcus bleeding on the ground, something inside him snapped. This was not just another tourist prank. This was a serious assault on an innocent man who worked hard every day to keep the area clean and beautiful. Wellington had watched Marcus work for months. He had noticed how carefully Marcus did his job, how he took pride in his work even though most people ignored him. Wellington's training told him to stay in position. His orders were clear: never move, never speak, never break character unless there was a direct threat to the royal family or the palace itself. But Wellington's conscience told him something different. Here was a man who needed help. Here was a situation where doing the right thing meant breaking the rules. For a moment, that felt like forever. Wellington stood perfectly still, watching Marcus bleed on the pavement. The crowd was getting bigger. The teenagers were arguing among themselves, and Marcus was still on the ground, hurt and alone. Wellington had to make a choice: follow his training or follow his heart, protect his career or protect an innocent man who had no one else to help him. The decision, when it came, surprised everyone, including Wellington himself. Time seemed to stop for James Wellington. He had been a royal guard for 5 years, and in all that time he had never broken his position. Not when tourists tried to make him laugh. Not when children cried right in front of him. Not even when it rained so hard that water ran down inside his uniform. But looking at Marcus bleeding on the ground changed something inside Wellington. This was not about following rules anymore. This was about being human. Wellington took one step forward, then another. His heavy black boots made loud sounds on the pavement. The crowd noticed immediately and started pointing at him. "Look, the guard is moving," someone whispered. "They are not supposed to do that," another person said. Wellington ignored the voices. He walked directly to where Marcus was lying and stood over him like a protective wall. His tall frame and bright red uniform made him impossible to ignore. "Stand back," Wellington shouted in his loudest military voice. The sound was so powerful that it made people jump. "Someone call for medical assistance immediately." The crowd was stunned into silence. No one had ever heard a royal guard speak while on duty. Some people started backing away automatically, responding to the authority in Wellington's voice. Wellington knelt down next to Marcus, still keeping his rifle in the proper position. His training had taught him never to put his weapon down, even in an emergency. "Sir, can you hear me?" Wellington asked Marcus in a gentler voice. "Help is coming." Marcus looked up at the guard through his pain and confusion. Blood was still flowing from his nose and his face was swelling. I think my nose is broken, he managed to say. Do not try to move, Wellington said. Stay still until the medics get here. The tall boy who had caused the accident was still standing nearby, looking pale and scared. His friends had backed away from him, no longer thinking his behavior was cool or funny. Wellington stood up and turned to face the boy. His voice was calm but firm. You need to stay right here, he told the teenager. The police will want to talk to you. It was an accident, the boy said quickly. I was not trying to hit him. That does not matter, Wellington replied. You hurt someone with your careless actions. You will need to take responsibility for what you did. Other tourists in the crowd started taking more pictures and videos. Some were filming Wellington, amazed to see a royal guard breaking all the rules. Others were recording Marcus bleeding on the ground. Within minutes, the area was full of activity. Palace security guards arrived first, running toward the scene. They looked confused when they saw Wellington out of position and talking to people. Guard Wellington, return to your post immediately, the head of security said when he reached them. Sir, this man needs medical attention, Wellington replied. I could not stand by and watch him suffer. That is not your job, the security chief said. We have procedures for handling situations like this. With respect, sir, your procedures were not fast enough, Wellington said. This man was bleeding and in pain. Someone needed to help him right away. An ambulance arrived with sirens wailing. The paramedics pushed through the crowd and immediately began checking Marcus's injuries. They confirmed that his nose was broken and that he might have a concussion from hitting his head on the ground. We need to take him to the hospital, one of the paramedics said. He needs x-rays and proper medical care. As the paramedics prepared to load Marcus onto a stretcher, he looked up at Wellington. Thank you, he said quietly. You did not have to help me. Yes, I did, Wellington replied. It was the right thing to do. The palace security team was not happy. Wellington had broken centuries of tradition by leaving his post and speaking while on duty. Royal guards were supposed to be like living statues, never reacting to anything happening around them. Guard Wellington, you are relieved of duty, the security chief announced. Report to the captain immediately. Wellington nodded and handed his rifle to another guard who had arrived to replace him. He knew he was in serious trouble, but he did not regret what he had done. As the ambulance drove away with Marcus inside, the crowd began to break up. But many people were still talking about what they had witnessed. Some were already posting videos on social media. The teenage boy who had caused the incident was taken aside by police officers. His friends tried to slip away quietly, but several witnesses pointed them out to the authorities. I want to call my parents, the boy said to the police. You will have that chance, an officer replied. But first, we need to understand exactly what happened here. Wellington walked toward the palace, escorted by 2 security guards. He could hear people in the crowd talking about him as he passed. I cannot believe he broke the rules like that, one woman said. He did the right thing, another person replied. That poor man needed help. But royal guards are not supposed to move, the first woman insisted. Maybe that rule needs to change, a man's voice added. As Wellington entered the palace, he thought about his career. He had worked so hard to become a royal guard. It was considered one of the highest honors in the British military. His grandfather had been a soldier, and Wellington had joined the army to follow in his footsteps. Becoming a royal guard required years of training and perfect behavior. Wellington had never been in trouble before. He had always followed orders exactly and never questioned the rules. But today was different. Inside the palace, Wellington was taken to a small office where his captain was waiting. Captain Morrison was an older man who had been in the military for over 30 years. He looked serious and disappointed. Guard Wellington, do you understand what you have done? Captain Morrison asked. Yes, sir, Wellington replied. I left my post without permission and spoke while on duty. Those are serious violations of protocol, the captain said. Royal guards have maintained their discipline for hundreds of years. We do not break character for any reason. I understand that, sir, Wellington said. But a man was hurt and bleeding. I could not just stand there and watch. That is exactly what you are supposed to do, Captain Morrison replied. We have other people whose job it is to handle emergencies. Your job is to guard this palace and represent the dignity of the royal family. Wellington said nothing. He knew the captain was right about the rules, but he still believed he had done the right thing. You are suspended from duty pending a full investigation, Captain Morrison announced. Turn in your uniform and report back here tomorrow morning for a disciplinary hearing. Yes, sir, Wellington said. As Wellington left the palace in his regular clothes, he felt strange and lost. For 5 years, putting on that red uniform had been the most important part of his day. It represented honor, duty, and service to his country. Now he might lose it all because he chose to help a stranger who was hurt and bleeding. Wellington walked home through the busy London streets, thinking about Marcus and wondering if the injured man would be okay. He also thought about his future and what would happen if he was dismissed from the Royal Guard. But despite all his worries, Wellington knew he would make the same choice again. Some things were more important than rules and traditions. Sometimes being human mattered more than being a perfect soldier. The hospital was busy and noisy. Marcus lay on a narrow bed in the emergency room, his face swollen and painful. The doctors had taken x-rays and confirmed that his nose was broken in 2 places. He also had a mild concussion from hitting his head on the pavement. You are lucky, the doctor told him. The break is clean and should heal properly. But you will need to rest for at least a week. No heavy lifting or strenuous activity. Marcus almost laughed, but it hurt too much. I clean streets for a living, he said. How am I supposed to rest for a week? Do you have sick leave from your job? The doctor asked. Some, Marcus replied, but not much. If I do not work, I do not get paid. The doctor looked sympathetic but could not help with Marcus's financial problems. I am sorry, but you really need to let your body heal. Head injuries are serious. As Marcus waited for his discharge papers, he thought about what had happened. The whole incident felt like a bad dream. 1 minute he was doing his job, and the next minute he was on the ground bleeding. But what surprised him most was the Royal Guard's reaction. In 3 years of working around the palace, Marcus had never seen a guard break character like that. The man had risked his career to help a stranger. Meanwhile, across London, James Wellington sat in his small apartment feeling lost and confused. He had lived in military housing near the palace for 5 years, but now he might have to give that up too if he lost his job. Wellington's phone kept ringing. News reporters had somehow gotten his number and wanted to interview him about breaking protocol. He ignored all the calls and turned off his phone, but he could not escape the news completely. His neighbor knocked on his door and showed him videos that were already spreading on social media. Someone had filmed the entire incident and posted it online. You are famous, his neighbor said, showing him the video on her phone. Look at all these comments. Most people are saying you did the right thing. Wellington watched himself on the small screen, breaking formation and protecting Marcus. It looked strange to see himself from the outside. In the video, he could see how his actions had shocked the crowd. The comments under the video were mixed. Some people praised Wellington for showing compassion and doing the right thing. Others criticized him for breaking centuries of tradition and failing in his duty as a royal guard. Royal guards are supposed to be disciplined and professional, one comment read. This man failed in his basic responsibilities, but there were many more supportive comments. Finally, a guard who remembers that he is human first and a soldier second, someone wrote. This man is a hero for protecting an innocent worker. Within hours, the story had spread to major news websites. Television news shows were discussing the incident and debating whether Wellington had done the right thing or violated his oath as a royal guard. Back at the hospital, Marcus was finally ready to leave. A nurse helped him fill out discharge papers and gave him instructions for caring for his injuries at home. Do you have someone who can check on you tonight? The nurse asked. With a concussion, you should not be alone for the first 24 hours. Marcus felt embarrassed. No, I live alone. I do not really have anyone. The nurse looked concerned. Do you have any family members you could call? My parents died a few years ago, Marcus said quietly. I do not have brothers or sisters. What about friends from work? Marcus shook his head. He realized how isolated his life had become since his injury and job loss. He spent most of his time alone working or sitting in his apartment. I will be fine, he told the nurse. I am used to taking care of myself. But the nurse was not satisfied. Let me give you a number to call if you start feeling worse. And please, if you feel dizzy or nauseous, come back to the hospital immediately. As Marcus left the hospital, reporters were waiting outside. Someone had found out he was the victim in the viral video, and they wanted his side of the story. "Mr. Chen, how do you feel about the royal guard who helped you?" a reporter asked, pushing a microphone toward his face. "I am grateful," Marcus said simply. "He did not have to help me, but he did. Do you think he should be punished for breaking protocol?" Another reporter asked. Marcus stopped walking and looked at the camera. "Punished? That man protected me when I was hurt and bleeding. If that is wrong, then I do not understand what right means anymore." The reporters followed Marcus as he walked toward the bus stop, asking more questions. But Marcus was tired and in pain. He just wanted to go home and rest. At Buckingham Palace, the situation was becoming a crisis. Palace officials were getting calls from news organizations around the world. The video of Wellington helping Marcus had been viewed millions of times in just a few hours. Captain Morrison sat in a meeting with senior palace officials, trying to decide how to handle the situation. "We cannot allow guards to break protocol whenever they feel like it," one official said. "If we do not discipline Wellington, other guards might think they can ignore orders too." "But the public reaction has been mostly positive," another official pointed out. "People see Wellington as a hero. If we punish him too harshly, it could create even more negative publicity." "The rules exist for good reasons," Captain Morrison said. "Royal guards represent the crown. They must maintain discipline and follow orders at all times." "But what about public safety?" a younger official asked. "Should not protecting innocent people be more important than following rules?" The debate continued for hours. Some officials wanted to dismiss Wellington immediately, to show that breaking protocol would not be tolerated. Others thought a lighter punishment would be better for the palace's public image. Meanwhile, the teenage boy who had caused the incident was also dealing with consequences. His parents had flown to London as soon as they heard what happened. They were shocked and embarrassed by their son's behavior. "I cannot believe you hurt someone like that," his father said. "We raised you better than this." "It was an accident," the boy protested. "I was not trying to hit him." "But you were trying to bother the guard," his mother replied. "You were showing off and being disrespectful. Now someone is in the hospital because of your actions." The boy's parents had hired a lawyer to help deal with the legal consequences. The police were considering charges of assault even though the injury was accidental. At minimum, the family would probably have to pay for Marcus's medical bills and lost wages. As night fell over London, the story continued to spread around the world. Social media users shared the video and debated whether Wellington was a hero or a failed soldier. Wellington himself tried to sleep, but could not stop thinking about the day's events. He kept seeing Marcus on the ground, bleeding and confused. He knew he had made the right choice, but he also knew his career was probably over. Tomorrow he would face a disciplinary hearing that could end his military service and force him to start his life over. But as Wellington finally drifted off to sleep, he felt something he had not expected: peace. For the first time in years, he had acted according to his conscience instead of just following orders. Whatever happened next, he could live with the consequences of doing what he believed was right. In his small apartment across town, Marcus lay awake despite his exhaustion and pain medication. His face throbbed and his head ached, but he kept thinking about the guard who had helped him. Marcus had spent 3 years feeling invisible, ignored by almost everyone around him. But today, one person had seen him as worthy of protection and care. One person had risked everything to help a stranger. Marcus decided that if the guard faced punishment for helping him, he would do everything possible to defend the man who had shown him such unexpected kindness. 3 days after the incident, Marcus was still recovering at home when someone knocked on his door. He was not expecting visitors and wondered who it could be. When he opened the door, he was surprised to see James Wellington standing in the hallway. Wellington was not wearing his Royal Guard uniform. Instead, he had on regular clothes, jeans and a simple jacket. He looked nervous and uncertain. "Mr. Chen, I hope I am not bothering you," Wellington said. "I wanted to check on you and see how you were feeling." Marcus was shocked. "Please come in," he said, stepping aside. "How did you find my address?" "I asked the hospital," Wellington explained. "I told them I was the guard who helped you and they gave me your information. I hope that is okay." "Of course," Marcus said. "I am glad you came. I wanted to thank you properly for what you did." Wellington looked around Marcus's small apartment. It was clean but very simple, with old furniture and few personal belongings. He could see that Marcus did not have much money. "You do not need to thank me," Wellington said. Anyone would have done the same thing. No, Marcus replied firmly. Most people would not have done what you did. You risked your job to help a stranger. That means everything to me. The two men sat down in Marcus's tiny living room. Up close, Marcus could see that Wellington looked tired and worried. How much trouble are you in? Marcus asked. Wellington sighed. A lot. I have been suspended pending a disciplinary hearing. They might dismiss me from the Royal Guard completely. That is not fair, Marcus said. You were helping someone who was hurt. The rules are the rules, Wellington replied. I knew what I was doing when I broke protocol. Marcus studied Wellington's face. Why did you do it? You could have just stood there like you were supposed to. No one would have blamed you. Wellington was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to answer. I have been watching you work for months, he finally said. Every day I see you cleaning the streets, taking pride in your job even though most people ignore you. You work hard and deserve respect, Marcus was surprised. You noticed me? Of course I noticed you, Wellington said. Just because we cannot talk or move does not mean we do not see what is happening around us. I know you come to work early and stay late. I know you pick up trash that other people miss. I know you care about doing a good job. Marcus felt his eyes getting wet. He had not realized that anyone had been watching him or appreciating his work. When I saw you bleeding on the ground, Wellington continued, I could not just stand there. You did not deserve to be hurt like that, and you definitely did not deserve to be ignored when you needed help. The two men talked for over an hour. Marcus learned that Wellington was 28 years old and had been in the military since he was 18. He had worked hard to become a Royal Guard because he wanted to serve his country with honor. My grandfather was a soldier in World War II, Wellington explained. He always told me that the most important thing was to protect people who could not protect themselves. I became a Royal Guard to honor his memory. Marcus told Wellington about his own life, how he had lost his construction job after his back injury, how hard it had been to find new work, how lonely his life had become. I used to build things, Marcus said. I was good at it and I enjoyed the work. Now I just clean up after other people. Sometimes I feel like my life has no purpose anymore. That is not true, Wellington said. Your work has purpose. You make the city more beautiful for millions of people every year. Without people like you, London would not be the amazing place it is. Marcus had never thought about his job that way before. He had always seen it as just something he had to do to survive. Wellington also shared something he had never told anyone before. My parents died in a car accident when I was 12, he said quietly. My grandmother raised me after that. She worked 2 jobs to keep me fed and in school. I am sorry, Marcus said. That must have been very hard. It was, Wellington replied. But my grandmother taught me that even when life is difficult, you have to help other people when you can. She said that is what makes us human. Marcus understood now why Wellington had risked his career to help him. It was not just about following rules or breaking them. It was about treating other people with kindness and respect. What will you do if they dismiss you from the Royal Guard? Marcus asked. Wellington shrugged. I do not know. I have been a soldier for 10 years. It is all I know how to do. I suppose I will have to figure out something else. You could do anything, Marcus said. You are smart and brave. Any employer would be lucky to have you. Thank you for saying that, Wellington replied. But it is scary to think about starting over at my age. Marcus laughed, even though it hurt his still healing nose. You are 28 years old. I am 34 and had to start over after my injury. If I can do it, so can you. The two men discovered they had more in common than they had expected. Both had lost their parents young. Both had worked hard jobs that other people did not always appreciate. Both understood what it meant to be overlooked and ignored by society. Can I ask you something? Marcus said. Do you regret what you did? Wellington thought carefully before answering. No, he said finally. I regret that I might lose my job, and I regret that my actions might cause problems for other guards. But I do not regret helping you. It was the right thing to do. Before Wellington left, Marcus asked for his phone number. I want to support you during your disciplinary hearing, he said. If they will let me, I want to speak on your behalf. You do not have to do that, Wellington protested. Yes, I do, Marcus replied. You stood up for me when I needed help. Now it is my turn to stand up for you. As Wellington walked home, he felt something he had not expected: friendship. For years, his life had been all about discipline, rules, and duty. He had not had time for close relationships or personal connections. But talking with Marcus had reminded him that there were things more important than following orders. Sometimes the most important thing was simply being kind to another human being. Marcus spent the rest of the evening thinking about their conversation. For the first time in years, he did not feel completely alone. He had made a real connection with another person who understood what his life was like. The next morning, Marcus called his supervisor at work. "I want to come back as soon as the doctor clears me," he said. "And I want to know about the disciplinary hearing for the guard who helped me. I need to be there." "Mr. Chen, you do not have to get involved in that," his supervisor said. "It is a military matter." "That guard saved me from further injury and maybe saved my life," Marcus replied. "I am going to be involved whether you like it or not." That evening, Wellington called Marcus to tell him when the disciplinary hearing would take place. "It is tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, he said. "But civilians are not usually allowed to attend military hearings." "Then I will wait outside until they let me speak," Marcus said. "I am not going to let them punish you without hearing from the person you helped." Neither man slept well that night. Wellington knew his military career was probably over. Marcus worried that his words might not be enough to save his new friend's job, but both men knew they had to try. Wellington had risked everything to help Marcus. Now Marcus was determined to risk whatever he could to help Wellington in return. By the morning of Wellington's disciplinary hearing, the story had exploded across the internet in ways no one had expected. The original video of the incident had been shared millions of times, and people around the world were talking about the royal guard who broke protocol to help an injured stranger. Marcus woke up to find his phone buzzing with notifications. Someone had found his social media accounts and shared his story. Suddenly, thousands of people were sending him messages of support and asking about Wellington's hearing. "This guard is a hero," one message read. "He should be promoted, not punished." "The royal family should be proud to have someone like this protecting them," said another. Marcus had never experienced anything like this attention before. As a street cleaner, he was used to being invisible. Now people around the world knew his name and were interested in his story. Television news shows were covering the story extensively. A reporter stood outside Buckingham Palace for the morning news, explaining the situation to viewers. "The question facing palace officials today is whether compassion or protocol should take priority," the reporter said. James Wellington, a 5-year veteran of the Royal Guard, faces possible dismissal for breaking centuries-old traditions to help an injured civilian. The reporter interviewed people on the street about their opinions. The responses were overwhelmingly supportive of Wellington. "Rules are important, but human decency is more important," one woman said. "This guard did exactly what any good person should do. I would want someone like him protecting my family," a man added. He showed real character and courage. Social media was even more active. The hashtag #Guard of Honor began trending worldwide as people shared their thoughts about the incident. Celebrities, politicians, and ordinary citizens were all weighing in on the debate. A famous actor tweeted, "James Wellington represents the best of British values: courage, compassion, and putting others first. He deserves our thanks, not punishment." A former military officer wrote, "Sometimes doing the right thing means breaking the rules." This guard understood that protecting innocent people is more important than standing still. But not everyone supported Wellington. Some people argued that military discipline was essential, and that breaking rules, even for good reasons, could not be tolerated. If guards can decide when to follow orders and when to ignore them, how can we trust them to protect the royal family? One critic wrote, "Traditions exist for good reasons," another person argued. "Once you start making exceptions, where does it end?" Marcus arrived at the palace early, hoping to speak at Wellington's hearing. He wore his best clothes, a simple suit he had bought years ago for job interviews. His face was still swollen and bruised, making it obvious he was the victim from the video. As soon as Marcus approached the palace gates, reporters recognized him and surrounded him with cameras and microphones. "Mr. Chen, how do you feel about Guard Wellington facing discipline for helping you?" a reporter asked. Marcus stopped walking and looked directly into the cameras. "James Wellington is one of the best men I have ever met," he said clearly. "He risked his career to help a stranger who was bleeding and hurt. If the palace punishes him for that, they are punishing someone for being a good human being." "Do you think he should have followed protocol instead?" another reporter asked. I think he followed a higher protocol, Marcus replied. The protocol of human decency and compassion. That should matter more than any rule about standing still. What do you want to say to palace officials? A third reporter asked. Marcus looked straight into the camera. I want to say that James Wellington represents everything good about your country and your military. If you punish him, you are telling the world that following rules is more important than protecting innocent people. Is that really the message you want to send? The interview was broadcast live on several news channels and shared instantly across social media. Marcus's simple, heartfelt words resonated with people around the world. Inside the palace, officials were watching the news coverage with growing concern. Phone calls were pouring in from government offices, military leaders, and even members of the royal family's staff. The public reaction is stronger than we expected, one official said during an emergency meeting. This story has touched a nerve with people. Look at these petition numbers, another official said, reading from his computer. Over 500,000 people have signed a petition demanding that Wellington be reinstated with full honors. Captain Morrison, who would be leading Wellington's disciplinary hearing, was feeling the pressure. He had spent his entire career following military rules and traditions, but he had never faced a situation where the entire world was watching and judging the military's decisions. We cannot make decisions based on public opinion, Captain Morrison said. We have to follow military law and procedure. But we also cannot ignore the impact this is having on the palace's reputation, a senior official replied. If we are seen as punishing someone for doing the right thing, it could damage the royal family's image for years. Meanwhile, Wellington sat in a waiting room preparing for his hearing. He had not looked at social media or watched the news. He wanted to face the hearing with a clear mind, focusing on his actions rather than public opinion. A military lawyer assigned to represent Wellington briefed him on what to expect. The charges against you are serious, the lawyer explained. Abandoning your post and breaking protocol are grounds for immediate dismissal. I understand, Wellington said calmly. However, the lawyer continued, the public support for your actions is unprecedented. That might influence the panel's decision. I do not want special treatment because of public pressure, Wellington said. I want to be judged on whether my actions were right or wrong. Outside the hearing room, Marcus waited with dozens of reporters and supporters who had gathered. Some were holding signs that read, Hero not criminal and compassion over protocol. An elderly woman approached Marcus and introduced herself. My name is Elizabeth Morrison, she said. I am Captain Morrison's mother. Marcus was surprised. The captain who is running the hearing? Yes, she said. I wanted to tell you that not everyone in the military thinks your guard should be punished. My son is a good man, but sometimes good men have to make difficult choices. What do you think he should do? Marcus asked. I think he should remember that the military exists to protect people, she replied. Your guard did exactly that. He protected you when you needed protection. As the hearing time approached, more supporters gathered outside the palace. Some were military veterans who understood the importance of following orders, but also believed that protecting innocent people was a higher duty. I served in the army for 20 years, one veteran told a reporter. I know how important discipline is, but I also know that good soldiers sometimes have to make split-second decisions about right and wrong. This guard made the right decision. A group of London street cleaners had also come to support Marcus in Wellington. They carried a banner that read, Thank you for protecting our brother. Marcus is one of us, explained their supervisor. He works hard and deserves respect. This guard gave him that respect when he needed it most. Inside the palace, Wellington was finally called into the hearing room. As he walked down the hallway, he could hear the sounds of the crowd outside chanting his name and calling for justice. The hearing room was formal and intimidating, with military officials sitting behind a long table. Captain Morrison sat in the center, flanked by other senior officers. Guard Wellington, Captain Morrison began. You are here to answer charges of abandoning your post and breaking Royal Guard protocol. How do you plead? Wellington stood at attention and spoke clearly. Guilty, sir. A murmur went through the room. His lawyer had advised him to plead not guilty and argue that his actions were justified. But Wellington wanted to be honest about what he had done. You admit that you left your post without permission? Captain Morrison asked. Yes, sir. And you admit that you spoke while on duty, which is strictly forbidden? Yes, sir. Then you understand that these actions normally result in immediate dismissal from the Royal Guard? Wellington paused for a moment, thinking about Marcus bleeding on the ground, about the choice he had faced between following rules and following his conscience. Yes, sir, I understand the normal consequences, Wellington said. But I also understand that sometimes normal circumstances require extraordinary actions. I would make the same choice again if faced with the same situation. The hearing room fell silent. Outside, the crowd continued to grow, waiting to learn the fate of the guard who had chosen humanity over protocol. The hearing room was tense and quiet after Wellington's bold statement. Captain Morrison looked at the other officers on the panel, trying to read their expressions. This was not a typical military disciplinary case, and there was no standard procedure for handling it. Guard Wellington, Captain Morrison said, do you understand that your primary duty as a royal guard is to protect the royal family and maintain the dignity of the crown? Yes, sir, I understand that completely, Wellington replied. But I also believe that representing the crown means representing the best values of our country. Protecting innocent people is one of those values. One of the other officers on the panel spoke up. The rules about remaining at your post exist for important security reasons. What if your movement had created a vulnerability that enemies could exploit? Wellington had thought about this question during his suspension. Sir, I assessed the situation quickly. There were no obvious security threats in the area. The incident occurred during normal tourist hours with full security coverage. I believed the risk of leaving my post was minimal compared to the need to help an injured civilian. But you are not trained to make those kinds of decisions, another officer said. You are trained to follow orders and maintain your position regardless of circumstances. With respect, sir, Wellington said, we are all trained to think and react when necessary. If a terrorist had attacked that crowd, I would not have stood still waiting for orders. I would have acted to protect people. This situation required the same kind of quick decision-making. Captain Morrison was impressed by Wellington's thoughtful answers, but he also understood the larger implications of this case. If the panel excused Wellington's actions, it could encourage other guards to break protocol whenever they thought it was justified. Guard Wellington, I am going to recess this hearing for 1 hour, Captain Morrison announced. The panel needs time to discuss your case and consider all the factors involved. As Wellington left the hearing room, he was surprised to see Marcus waiting in the hallway with several palace officials. Mr. Chen has requested permission to speak on your behalf, one official explained. Normally, civilians are not allowed to participate in military hearings, but given the unusual circumstances, the panel has agreed to hear his statement. Marcus looked nervous, but determined. I do not know much about military law, he told Wellington, but I know about right and wrong. What you did was right, and I am going to make sure they understand that. Wellington felt grateful to have such strong support from the man he had helped. Thank you, he said simply. Whatever happens, I am glad I could help you when you needed it. While the hearing was recessed, the scene outside the palace was becoming more dramatic. The crowd of supporters had grown to over 1,000 people. News crews from around the world were broadcasting live from the scene. A group of military veterans had organized a peaceful demonstration supporting Wellington. They stood in formation, wearing their old uniforms and holding signs that read, "Honor through action and true British courage." This young guard represents everything we fought for, said Colonel David Thompson, a decorated veteran who had served in Afghanistan. We did not serve our country just to follow rules blindly. We served to protect people and defend what is right. Social media activity had reached unprecedented levels. The hashtag Our Guard of Honor was trending in over 50 countries. Celebrities, politicians, and ordinary citizens continued to share their opinions about the case. The Prime Minister's office released a carefully worded statement. While we respect the independence of military disciplinary procedures, we believe that acts of compassion and heroism should be recognized and valued in our society. Even members of the royal family were reportedly following the case closely, though they could not comment publicly on military matters. Inside the palace, senior officials were meeting to discuss the broader implications of Wellington's case. The public reaction had been so strong that any decision would have lasting consequences. If we dismiss Wellington, we will be seen as punishing someone for doing the right thing, one official argued. The damage to our reputation could last for years. But if we excuse his actions, we risk undermining military discipline, another official replied. Every guard might think they can break rules whenever they disagree with them. Perhaps there is a middle ground, suggested a senior advisor. We could use this case as an opportunity to review and update our protocols. Maybe the rules need to change to allow for situations like this. When the hearing reconvened, Captain Morrison looked more thoughtful than before. The panel had clearly struggled with their decision. Before we continue with Guard Wellington's case, Captain Morrison announced, we will hear a statement from Mr. Marcus Chen, the civilian who was injured in the incident. Marcus walked to the front of the room, still showing visible signs of his injuries. He was not used to speaking in formal settings, but his sincerity was obvious to everyone present. My name is Marcus Chen, he began. 3 years ago, I lost my job in construction because of a back injury. Since then, I have worked as a street cleaner around Buckingham Palace. Most days I feel invisible. People walk past me like I do not exist. Marcus paused, gathering his thoughts. When that boy kicked me in the face, I was hurt and bleeding on the ground. I was scared and alone. But then James Wellington stepped forward and protected me. For the first time in years, someone saw me as worthy of help and respect. Several people in the room were visibly moved by Marcus's simple, honest words. You are asking whether James broke the rules, Marcus continued. I think he followed a more important rule, the rule that says we should help each other when we can. He saw someone who needed help and he helped. That is what good people do. Marcus looked directly at Captain Morrison. Sir, I do not know much about military law or royal protocols, but I know that James Wellington is exactly the kind of person I would want protecting my country and my royal family. He is brave, compassionate, and he does what is right even when it is difficult. Thank you, Mr. Chen, Captain Morrison said. Your words carry great weight in this matter. After Marcus left, the panel deliberated for another 30 minutes. When they returned, Captain Morrison's expression was serious but not angry. Guard Wellington, he began, this panel has considered your case very carefully. Your actions clearly violated established protocols for royal guards. Under normal circumstances, these violations would result in immediate dismissal. Wellington stood at attention, prepared for the worst. However, Captain Morrison continued, these were not normal circumstances. You faced a situation that required immediate action to protect an innocent civilian from further harm. Your quick thinking and compassionate response prevented additional injury and possibly saved a life. The room was completely silent as everyone waited for the final decision. After careful consideration of all factors, including your exemplary service record and the extraordinary public support for your actions, this panel has decided to suspend you from duty for 2 weeks without pay. You will also be required to complete additional training on protocol and emergency procedures. Wellington felt confused. This seemed like a punishment, but not as severe as he had expected. Captain Morrison was not finished. However, we are also recommending you for promotion to senior guard, effective immediately after your suspension. Your actions, while technically incorrect, demonstrated the kind of leadership and moral courage we want in our senior personnel. The room erupted in surprised murmur. This was completely unexpected. Furthermore, Captain Morrison added, we are forming a committee to review and update Royal Guard protocols to better address emergency situations involving civilian safety. You will serve as an advisor to this committee. Wellington could hardly believe what he was hearing. Instead of being dismissed, he was being promoted and asked to help improve the very rules he had broken. Do you accept these terms, Guard Wellington? Captain Morrison asked. Yes, sir, Wellington replied, his voice strong and clear. I accept them with honor and gratitude. As news of the decision spread outside the palace, the crowd erupted in cheers. Marcus, who had been waiting anxiously with the supporters, felt tears of relief and joy running down his face. The palace had made a decision that satisfied both the need for military discipline and the public demand for justice. Wellington would face consequences for breaking rules, but he would also be recognized and rewarded for doing the right thing. More importantly, the incident would lead to meaningful changes in how the Royal Guard handled emergency situations. Future guards would have clearer guidelines about when they could break protocol to help people in danger. It was a victory for compassion, common sense, and the idea that sometimes the most important duty is simply being human. 6 months after the incident that changed everything, Marcus Chen stood in a conference room overlooking the Thames River. He was wearing a new suit and speaking to a group of business leaders about his foundation. The same man who had once felt invisible while cleaning streets was now addressing some of the most powerful people in London. The Chen Foundation for Second Chances provides job training and support for people who face barriers to employment, Marcus explained to the audience. We help people with disabilities, those recovering from injuries, and anyone who needs a fresh start in life. The foundation had grown beyond Marcus's wildest dreams. Donations had poured in from around the world after his story became famous. People wanted to support the humble street cleaner who had been helped by a brave royal guard. Marcus had hired a small staff and rented office space in central London. They offered classes in computer skills, job interview techniques, and basic business training, but more importantly, they provided hope to people who felt forgotten by society. 6 months ago, I was cleaning streets and feeling like my life had no purpose, Marcus told the business leaders. Now I help dozens of people every month find new careers and rebuild their confidence. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us can lead to the best opportunities. In the audience, James Wellington listened with pride as his friend spoke. Wellington was now senior guard at Buckingham Palace, but he spent his free time serving on the foundation's board of directors. Wellington's life had also been transformed by the events of that Tuesday morning. His promotion had come with new responsibilities, including training younger guards and helping to update palace security procedures. The Protocol Review Committee had completed its work, establishing new guidelines that allowed guards to assist civilians in emergency situations while maintaining overall security. Wellington had played a key role in writing these new rules. We call them the Wellington Protocols, Captain Morrison had explained when the new guidelines were announced. They recognize that protecting innocent people is always part of our duty, even when it requires flexibility in our procedures. The new protocols had been adopted by royal guards at all palaces, and had even influenced security procedures at government buildings around the world. Wellington's split-second decision to help Marcus had created changes that would affect thousands of guards and millions of civilians for years to come, but perhaps the most important change was in Wellington himself. The rigid soldier who had once followed every rule without question had learned to balance duty with compassion, discipline with humanity. I used to think that being a good soldier meant never thinking for myself, Wellington told a group of military recruits during a training session. Now I understand that being a good soldier means thinking carefully about what is right and having the courage to act on those beliefs. The teenage boy who had caused the original incident had also experienced significant changes. Tyler Morrison, no relation to Captain Morrison, had returned to the United States deeply affected by what he had done. His parents had insisted that he take responsibility for his actions. Tyler had written a formal apology to Marcus and had worked with his family's lawyer to pay all of Marcus's medical bills and lost wages. But Tyler wanted to do more than just pay money. He had asked to volunteer with the Chen Foundation during his summer vacation from school. I was showing off and being disrespectful, Tyler said during his first day volunteering at the foundation. I hurt someone who was just trying to do his job. I want to spend my time helping people instead of hurting them. Marcus had been hesitant at first to work with the young man who had injured him, but he recognized that Tyler was genuinely sorry and wanted to change. People make mistakes, Marcus told Wellington when discussing whether to accept Tyler as a volunteer. The important thing is what they do after they make those mistakes. Tyler proved to be a dedicated volunteer. He helped set up computers for job training classes, assisted elderly clients with paperwork, and even used his experience with social media to help promote the foundation's work. Marcus taught me that every person has value and deserves respect, Tyler said in a video he made to promote the foundation. I learned that lesson in the worst possible way, but I'm grateful I learned it. The foundation's success had attracted attention from other organizations and government agencies. Marcus had been invited to speak at conferences about helping people with disabilities find employment. He had also been asked to advise government programs designed to assist people who were struggling to find work. 6 months ago, I thought my life was basically over, Marcus said during one of these speaking engagements. I was 34 years old, injured, and working a job that made me feel invisible. I could not imagine anything good happening to me. Marcus paused and looked out at the audience of social workers, government officials, and business leaders. Then someone I had never met risked his career to help me when I was hurt and bleeding. That act of kindness reminded me that I had value as a human being. It gave me the confidence to start this foundation and help other people who feel the way I used to feel. The friendship between Marcus and Wellington had grown stronger over the months. They had dinner together every Sunday, often joined by Wellington's grandmother, who had become like family to Marcus. "You boys remind me that good things can come from bad situations," she told them during one of these dinners. "James, you learned that sometimes rules need to be broken for the right reasons. Marcus, you learned that one person's kindness can change everything." Wellington's grandmother had been right about the power of kindness. The video of Wellington helping Marcus had been viewed over 50 million times. It had inspired countless other acts of compassion around the world. Schools showed the video to teach students about standing up for others. Military academies used it to discuss the balance between following orders and doing what is right. Social workers shared it to demonstrate the importance of treating every person with dignity. We get emails every week from people who say our story inspired them to help someone else. Marcus told a reporter during an interview marking the 6-month anniversary of the incident. A teacher who started tutoring struggling students for free. A nurse who spent extra time with lonely patients. A businessman who hired someone everyone else had rejected. The reporter asked Marcus what he thought was the most important lesson from his experience. "I learned that everyone matters," Marcus replied. "For years I felt like I was invisible, like my life did not count for anything. But James showed me that every person deserves help when they need it, regardless of their job or social status." Wellington, who was also being interviewed, added his perspective. "I learned that doing the right thing is not always the same as following rules. Sometimes you have to risk something important to protect something even more important." The palace had embraced the positive publicity from Wellington's story. Tour guides now told visitors about the guard who had shown compassion and courage, and how his actions had led to important changes in royal security procedures. "This incident represents the best values of the British military and the royal family," a palace spokesperson had said. Guard Wellington demonstrated that true honor comes from protecting and serving others, especially those who cannot protect themselves. As the 6-month anniversary of the incident approached, Marcus and Wellington were invited to attend a special ceremony at Buckingham Palace. The Queen herself wanted to meet the two men whose story had touched people around the world. "I understand that your actions led to important improvements in our security procedures," the Queen told Wellington during the private meeting. "But more importantly, your compassion reminded everyone that kindness and duty are not opposites. They are partners." To Marcus, she said, "Your foundation is helping people across our country find new hope and new opportunities. You have turned a painful experience into something beautiful that serves others." After the ceremony, Marcus and Wellington walked together through the same area where the incident had occurred 6 months earlier. Marcus was no longer a street cleaner there. He now ran his foundation full-time. Wellington was no longer just another guard. He was a senior leader, helping to train the next generation of royal protectors. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you had just stayed in position that day?" Marcus asked his friend. Wellington considered the question seriously. "Sometimes I do," he said. "I think about how my career might have been different, how your injuries might have been worse without immediate help, how we never would have become friends. And?" Marcus prompted. "And I am more convinced than ever that I made the right choice," Wellington replied. "Some moments define who we really are. That was one of those moments for both of us." As they walked past the spot where Marcus had fallen and Wellington had made his crucial decision, both men reflected on how much their lives had changed. A violent accident had led to an act of courage, which had led to friendship, personal growth, and positive changes that affected thousands of other people. "I have a confession to make," Marcus said as they reached the palace gates. "I used to hate coming to work here every day.